going out of the box to the range. First shots. Sig P365 out of the box to rider's range. Mossberg MC1sc and the Sig P365. The Sig's been out for a year and a half now. The Mossberg was introduced this year. Both interesting guns. Both in a lot of ways they're comparable, in several ways they're different. Rider's Range is going to take a look at those. You may have already seen the Rider's Range videos on the first shots of each of these guns. I'll have links below to both of those videos. And I want to thank Ragnarok Arms for their support of Rider's Range. Ragnarok Arms is a 5-star range and training facility with a retail and online store, and they can be found at ragnarok.com. I also want to thank Webster Gun Works for making the Mossberg available at a fair price, and also thank Ragnarok Arms down in Saline, Michigan for making the Sig 365 available also at a reasonable price for Rider's Range. Both of these guns are striker-fired guns. Sig's got the safety. The Mossberg does not have the safety. They're relatively comparable, as I said, in many ways. When you get to price, when they're comparably equipped, when you equip the Mossberg with night sights, of course the Sig comes standard with night sights, then the price isn't that far apart. Sig doesn't list MSRPs on their website, at least not that I can find. We'll get into the prices shortly, but when they're comparably equipped, there's less than $100 difference between the two. So is there $100 difference between the guns themselves? Well, let's find out. Let's start by looking at the Mossberg. That was the one I picked up first. I like this because it's compact, it's got a straight trigger, and lo and behold, it takes Glock magazines. Now it comes with 2 magazines on its own. They're not manufactured by Glock, obviously. Comes with a 6-round flush magazine. Also comes with a 7-round extended magazine that does provide a little more grip on the gun itself, and actually the extended magazine makes this gun fit very nicely in the hand, and the magazine itself is textured to match the grip on the frame. Glock 6-round magazine fits also. Fits very well, still works well in the hand, still gives a good solid grip. You can get extended magazines with a Glock 43. You can get extension kits that'll add 2 or 3 rounds. I've even seen extended magazines that'll go up to 12 rounds. Not that I'd want to carry one that way, and I haven't function tested any of them. So it's essentially, this Mossberg is limited to 7+1 in most configurations. The Sig, on the other hand, comes with 2 magazines, and these are both 10-round magazines. You can also get, for the Sig, a 12-round magazine and even a 15-round magazine. We've tested the 2 10-round magazines, and we've also tested the 15-round magazine out of the range. I haven't tested the 12 yet, I just picked it up, but I'm confident that it's going to work as well as anything else. So it's interesting that these guns are going to be roughly the same size. We'll put them side by side here in just a minute. Yet the Sig carries more ammunition than the Mossberg, and normally I get into weights later in the video, but we'll mention that now. The MC1 with 6 rounds plus 1 weighs in at 22.3 ounces. The Sig 365 with 10 rounds plus 1 weighs out at 23.7 ounces. So we're talking just an ounce and a half more to get the additional 4 rounds out of that 365. So when we look at size on these, for all practical purposes, they look very similar in size. The Mossberg is just a little bit longer. Barrel is about a 1/4 of an inch longer. I don't give exact specs on these things. As long as they fit, I don't worry about hundredths of an inch or tenths of an inch even here and there. I just put them side by side, and you can see that there's a little difference in size slide wise, and profile wise they're about the same height. That's again without a magazine in. Put the flush round magazine in the Sig and the flush round magazine in the Mossberg. And overall height wise, they're again about the same. Width, they're pretty comparable. So I mean, there's only so much you can do with a pocket gun like this and making it smaller. It's amazing what Sig did to increase the capacity in a gun that's no wider than the Mossberg, no taller than the Mossberg, yet you get 4 more rounds out of it. So other similarities between them: front cocking serrations on each one, rear cocking serrations on each. Now the Mossberg's a little different pattern. Slide profiles very similar. The Sig is kind of a typical Sig pattern, slightly rounded on the top, more squared off. The Mossberg is it does have beveled edges on it. The Mossberg is rounded a little bit more. It's a little bit more of a melt treatment, particularly on the front. The slide is a little more rounded off on the Mossberg. It's more angled on the Sig. Let's see, the barrel on the Mossberg sticks out from the frame just a little bit. On the Sig, it's pretty flush. Again, none of those are deal breakers and by any means. Sights are similar. Now the Sig comes standard with night sights, and I like this particular setup on the Sig. There's enough light space on each side of that, the front sight when you're looking through the back, so that you get a good clear sight definition, yet that green front sight is real easy to pick up. The Mossberg, on the other hand, I ordered this with night sights, and it's still got a good high definition front sight, but they're all white. I do like the U-notch on the back, and again, you've got a decent light definition on each side of that front sight. They both will ring steel at 25 yards. At 50 yards. They're accurate enough, although I think the Sig does have an overall accuracy edge. In fact, shooting them both at 15 yards at a 3-inch circle, the Sig does wonderfully well. This is probably the best shooting micro gun or pocket gun that I've had in a long time, maybe forever. That I can put all of those shots offhand in a 3-inch circle at 15 yards with no problem at all. And if I took my time, I could probably tighten that group up. I might even be able to get a similar group out to 25. Mossberg, on the other hand, might be just a little bit looser. It did come, the Sig, by the way, came direct on from the factory. This gun was sighted on exactly where I wanted it. The Mossberg was shooting a little bit to the left. I did have to drift that rear sight a little to the right, and it still shoots just a little bit low, but it's accurate enough for me. The grouping is decent enough for 15 yards, and again, it'll ring 10-inch steel plates at 50 yards all day long. Mossberg, good texturing on the back strap, so the grip texture is right where I need it. Even got texture on the front of the grip, and it's not checkering, but it's texturing that definitely works. The Sig, on the other hand, is more of a stippling, and again, it's got all the texture that I need right where I need it, and even the base of this magazine has texturing on it. So I've never had a problem in more than 200 rounds through the Sig, almost 300 rounds to the Mossberg. I haven't had any problem with these guns slipping in my hand or having to be re-gripped. Undercut trigger guards on both. The trigger guards are large enough to get gloved hands in, particularly the Mossberg. The trigger guard on this gun is large. Trigger's a little bit different. The Mossberg has that, to me, absolutely useless tab on the trigger that obviously keeps the trigger from being pulled if you're pushing on the side of the trigger, but anything that gets in the way is still going to be able to pull this. And these guns have been safety inspected. I do like the fact that the trigger is straight on the Mossberg. Now the Sig 365 XL, I understand, is coming out with a straight trigger, but the Sig itself is a curved trigger. Now the Sig I like because it does not have that useless safety tab on it. And there's also a difference in a couple of things on these triggers. One is the feel of the Mossberg. When I did the extended test on this, I put almost 250 rounds through it, and I started to get a blister on the side of my trigger finger. And it's just the way that the tab and the trigger itself work together to start rubbing. Particularly, it's on the reset. Start to rub. I can feel it right there. The trigger is pushing my finger down against the trigger guard, and that eventually brought up a blister. If you're shooting a box of 50 rounds, probably no big deal. 250 rounds in one sitting, it was a big deal. The Sig, on the other hand, doesn't have that issue, even when my finger's at the bottom of it. I think it's more a product of the straight trigger on the Mossberg, not centering my finger on the trigger, whereas with the Sig, that curved trigger does put my finger on the center. Now, generally I like a straight trigger. It's just not working as well for me on the Mossberg. So trigger weights are also interesting. The Sig, surprisingly, comes in at 6 pounds, and these are pivoting triggers, so a lot of it depends on where you put the gauge. If it's down here on the tip, it's going to come in a little lighter than if you put it on the center. But the Sig regularly tests right where my finger rests at about 6 pounds. It's a smooth trigger. There's a little bit of take up, as you can see. As I press onto that trigger, it's smooth and it breaks and it stops. There's no over travel stop on this, but it doesn't need to be. The reset is relatively short and back to a smooth 6 pound pull again. That doesn't feel 6 pounds, and it has a very, very nice trigger. I like it. Mossberg, on the other hand, it weighs in at 5 pounds plus, but this trigger, I don't know if it's just this gun or if it's the way Mossberg designed it, but it's almost like it's a two-stage trigger. There's a take up, there's one stage right there. I could feel it hit a wall, and then all of a sudden it went through the wall and stopped again. And that first one's about a 5 pound pull, just a little under. And then against this wall is the break. And it's fairly clean once you get back there. That's a little over 5, and of course it stops without having a trigger stop on it. And then there's the reset, and it's pinching my finger again as it does it. The reset's out to here, and there's that first pull, and there's the second. So it almost feels like a two-stage trigger. Most of the time, about 1 round out of 100 when I was shooting this gun, I was expecting that first wall, and I didn't get it, and the gun discharged. Fortunately, it was pointed down range. I'm not pulling the trigger until it's pointed in the safe direction, but it feels like a two-stage trigger. It does have a lot of take up. It's nice once you get past that two-stage part. I'm not sure what's hidden in the when you first move it, but you can almost see the internals up in here. You can see them moving a little bit. There's the take up. There's the first stage, and then it fires. Haven't figured out what it is. Don't like it at all. Sig, again, no problem at all on the trigger. Lovely trigger. Although the Mossberg trigger it didn't seem to hurt in shooting it at 15 yards on a stationary target. It seemed to work well with the plates, and shooting it fast enough, I don't notice that two-stage. If I'm not trying to take my time and do precision shooting with the trigger on the Mossberg, I don't really notice that. Shooting fast, not a big deal. And maybe Mossberg knows about it. Maybe that happens on other guns, or maybe it's just mine. If they know about it, it's probably one of those where they say, don't worry about it. Most people aren't going to pay any attention to it. So what else can I tell you about these guns? Oh, the magazine release is nicely textured on the Mossberg. It's very pronounced, easy to get a hold of, no trouble dropping the magazines. It's smaller and just a different shape anyway. It may not be overall smaller. There's no texturing on it, but it does have a little ridge all the way around the diamond-shaped magazine release on the Sig. Slide stop lever is protected somewhat on the Mossberg. It does have it's recessed to the frame somewhat, although I still got an occasional fail to lock back on the last stop when I shoot this with a high grip. My thumb is wanting to sit right about where that slide stop lever is. The Sig has a more pronounced slide stop lever. I've definitely had several issues with that where the slide did not lock back on the last shot, and I'm 100% sure that that's because my thumb was on it. One other thing I really like about both of these guns is the takedown. You don't have to pull the trigger to take it down. Sig is fairly simple. Again, this one's empty. We'll take the magazine out and run the slide back, lock it in place, turn the lever down to takedown lever down to a little bit more than it's about 630 position, and slide comes right off. It's real simple takedown. put it back on, you've got to make sure that slide is, or slide stop lever, excuse me, the takedown lever is in about the 630 position. Put the slide on, lock it back, safety lever up, and bingo, guns back together. Once you get it apart, it comes, the barrel and captured recoil spring come apart like anything else. You've probably seen the videos on the Mossberg where, again, you don't have to worry about whether or not you pull the trigger before you shoot it. You push down on the tab on the back, and this piece comes right out. Striker comes out, slide comes off the frame, and again, captured recoil spring, barrel comes out like all of your typical power frame type guns. Goes back together just about as easy. Make sure the recoil spring is in the notch. Put it back on the frame, run it back in, lock the slide back, drop the striker down into the channel, and then use the back plate to push down on the striker and put the back plate in place, and voila, guns back together. Real simple, don't have to pull the trigger on either one of these. Definitely like how that works. I mentioned earlier that the price is relatively comparable on these guns, within $100 of each other. Now, when you're talking a $400 gun, a $100 spread is obviously quite a bit of difference. Sig, I mentioned the manufacturer's website does not list the manufacturer's suggested retail price on the Sig. They're going new on the auction sites for around 450 plus. I've found a couple of used 365s that are in the 375 plus, and again, these are standard with night sights, 2 magazines. The Mossberg does have a manufacturer suggested retail price of $421 for the base model. With the night sights, it's got an MSRP of $526. I found them, the base model, on the auction sites new for $310 plus, and the ones with the night sights I've been finding for around $380, give or take. And I haven't found any of the Mossbergs used yet, and again, it's only been out for a few months now, so I don't anticipate finding any of these used. So there is a winner here. I think that you've already guessed by now that the winner is the Sig 365. The ergonomics are great. It's got a phenomenal trigger for a striker fire gun. Even though it's 6 pounds, it's still a great trigger. It doesn't have that ridiculous tab in the middle of the trigger. I do like the safety on this one. It is ambidextrous, by the way. And it's big enough for my thumb to get on it like I'm shooting a 1911, but it's not so big that I can ride it like I like to do with a 1911. So the Sig has the extra 4 rounds, has the capacity. Add that extended magazine, you got 12 rounds in it in a really compact package. It's very controllable. It comes with everything you need in a new gun. The night sights, everything functioning properly, easy to take down without pulling the trigger. The Sig is the hands down winner over the Mossberg. I had a lot of hopes for the Mossberg to start with. That trigger pinching, the 2-stage type of trigger, both of those threw me off. And again, if you go back and look at the first shots video with the Mossberg, you'll see that we had a lot of problems with the slide failing to go into battery. It did cure itself within the first 100 rounds, or actually less than 100 rounds, and the last 220 some rounds that I put through it, I had no problems at all. So just a break-in issue, didn't have to break the Sig in at all. And both of these guns will shoot anything, any ammo that I stuff through it. 115 grain, 124 grain. I haven't done a lot of defensive ammo yet in the 365, but I don't anticipate that that's going to be an issue. Again, the Mossberg had a lot of hopes for it, and it's a good gun. I don't have any complaints about the gun for the price, other than a couple of trigger issues and getting a broken end. But the Sig is definitely the hands-down winner. If you like these videos, we appreciate the thumbs up. In order to find out what we're playing, go to our website, ridersrange.com, and find the links to all the videos, and find the playlist coming up for the great affordable 1911 series. Any comments on either of these guns or anything else, anything you'd like to see on Riders Range, by all means, let us know. Leave a comment here, or send us an email to info@ridersrange.com. And if you want to get notified by YouTube of future videos coming up, by all means, subscribe and hit notifications. So that's it for the two little pocket guns. I've got another video coming out shortly comparing a couple of more pocket guns, and then we'll get back into the 1911 series. And I want to thank you for visiting Riders Range.
"50 yards. I'm sure it'll do it. We'll start with the gong. It works on the gong. How about the 12? Yep. How about the other 12? Can I do a 10-inch? I guess it can. Not bad.